Welcome back. Today I'm going to put my amateur evaluation skills to the test and attempt to analyze a game by grandmasters. The game in this case is Bobby Fischer versus Brent Larsen from 1958. And again, I'm doing this because I was given advice as a beginning learner of chess to study grandmaster games. The only thing I can think of is to try to play through them and see what I can figure out. What do their moves prepare or prevent or propose in some cases? In this game, which I have not looked through yet, Bobby Fischer opens with e4. I believe I've read somewhere that he said e4 best by test and tended to play it a lot. Mr. Larsen responded with c5, the Sicilian. I've tried the Sicilian a few times, even though it's not recommended for beginners. I understand that the idea is to stake a claim on at least one center square without actually challenging White's piece that's already there. Bobby Fischer responds with knight to f3, which is, I believe, normal in the Sicilian. And I think d6 is also normal to help support the pawn we've already pushed up there. It looks a little dangerous in that it exposes the king to this attack, but I think that's a fairly rudimentary way to respond to the Sicilian. I don't know. I haven't played it a lot. And Fischer plays d4, which, if I remember right, is also a really great move. I think the idea is to go ahead and challenge this or ask him if he wants to take. So this move, I don't know that it prepares or prevents anything, but it proposes an exchange. If black takes, we can capture back with either the knight or the queen. I don't know which one's better. If they don't take, I think we might just push past. And Larsen takes. And Fischer takes back with the knight. Okay, so now we have a pawn and a piece in the center of the board. And this knight is guarding a lot of territory, or at least looking at a lot of territory on the other side. And this pawn is also looking at some territory on the other side. I don't know, but I assume that would be a good next move to immediately challenge the the knight. Does that make sense? I don't know, or maybe at this point just a normal developing move. Let's see what Larsen does. Larsen plays knight to f6. Okay, threatening this pawn, which is currently unguarded. I know we can guard it with the bishop. We can guard it with a pawn. We could guard it with the knight, but that moving the knight there blocks this bishop, and moving this knight here blocks this pawn. So I don't know. Let's see what Fischer does. Fischer plays knight to c3. Okay. That makes sense. Protecting this pawn, getting another knight out, and this knight guards two squares on the other side of the board, as well as guarding the pawn and over here, while our knight already guards. So we're guarding a lot of territory on the other side of the board. Okay. What does Larsen? I'm going to go ahead and show Stockfish here, just so you guys can see, because I'm seeing it. You might as well see it. Stockfish actually says his best move here is a6. And knight to c6 is the other only good move, and any other move is at least inaccurate. And Larsen plays g6, which Stockfish thinks is not completely on above board. I assume the only reason you would play that g6 is in order to fianchetto the bishop and then immediately castle. Since your advantage of the Sicilian, whatever you had there, is gone. It doesn't guard a center square anymore. Okay. I don't know how you would respond to that other than maybe putting this knight back where it came from. Stockfish is saying f3 is the best idea here, and bishop to e3 is the next best idea, which is what Fischer plays, maintaining a pretty solid advantage. And Larsen fianchettos the bishop, as we suspected. And now f3 is again the best move. Normally we're told not to move this pawn because it opens this diagonal toward the king. But in this case, there's nothing coming to this diagonal. Neither one of Black's diagonal moving pieces that can touch dark squares is anywhere close to getting there. So it looks like it makes sense to go ahead and move that now. And that's what Fischer plays. Larsen castles, which is the obvious next move after these three moves. Okay, nothing complex there. And I did learn recently, I didn't really understand this before, but this is one of the most powerful pieces in this position when you fianchetto it, that you always have to look at every piece on this diagonal when that bishop is there. Unless you're able to blockade it with a pawn chain that it just can't bite through. So we have a lot to worry about here. This knight can always go somewhere and do something while leaving things under attack along that diagonal. Okay, I don't know. I haven't looked at the engine yet. I'm looking at the board. Don't know what White's best move is here, although I would assume at some point you want to move this bishop somewhere, maybe here, and then castle. At this point, you also might want to move your queen and castle long. I don't know. Although, I think it's probably not a good idea to castle long with this bishop sitting there. Don't know. Okay, Stockfish says queen to d2, preparing long castling. Let's see what Mr. Fischer does. He plays queen to d2. Okay. And here, Larsen has some pieces he needs to start moving. And it looks like he picks one of them, which is Stockfish's top move for Black, knight to c6 out. That makes sense. Now, since we moved our queen up, are we going to castle long? Or are we going to keep our options open by moving this bishop? Are we going to trade knights? Are we going to move this knight back? What are we doing? Let's see. Okay, Stockfish says long castle. Or bishop to c4. Are the two top moves, and Mr. Fischer plays the second one. Okay, that makes sense because you're leaving your options open to castle to either side. And we're willing to trade this knight apparently, if that's what Black wants. That is what Black wanted. Since the best move would have been bishop, that because you want to develop another piece and start connecting the rooks. That's what Stockfish says. But the second best move is this. Which makes sense. I mean, they're sitting there. They're going to get traded at some point anyway, aren't they? But that doesn't that give an opportunity to move this bishop directly aligning with this one? Of course, that's the only move that's not a mistake. So I guess it makes sense that Fischer played this. And what happens here? Larsen moves the bishop out a little further than he probably should have. Remember earlier it was saying here, this blocks in this pawn. And if you trade now, you're going to damage your own pawn structure, but that frees your rook. So maybe that's a good idea. I don't know. Good moves here for White are to take or to drop back. Fischer decides to drop back. Larsen plays his best move, which is queen to a5. I'm not sure I understand that one. I know it connects the rooks, which is one of the goals of the opening. But it looks to me like it's setting up a kind of a dangerous situation here, which is maybe what Larsen wanted, to kind of pin this knight to the queen. But it also exposes your queen to a discovered attack at some point in the future, should you want to move this knight somewhere at some point. But I guess because you have these bishops already pointing this way, it makes it look kind of like he's expecting Fischer to castle queenside, so he's just lining up everything pointing at that corner. And queenside castling is the best move here, and that's what Fischer does. Okay. would not have expected that with all of this pointing there, but that's what Stockfish says, and clearly if Bobby Fischer played it, then it was better than what I would have thought of. At that point, because of all the diagonals and queen and everything pointing at this quadrant of the board, I think I would have castled the other way while I had the chance. But that shows how much I know. Okay, now what does black do? What does black do? I really don't know. Would you bring a rook to an open file at this point? Okay, well, Stockfish says that's the second best move is to bring a rook to an open file. Okay, and the first best move is what Larsen played, b5. The only thing I can think of is he's preparing to go b4 in order to hit this knight. Oh, and then where's the knight going to go? I don't know. Probably not there. Maybe drop back. Maybe come up here, because once the pawn's forward, nothing's guarding that spot on their side except the bishop. I don't know. Okay, king to b1, best move. Makes sense, because at some point, if you're going to end up trading here, you're going to not want this queen to be able to come down. I do know that. Go back a move. If at some point we get a trade here like this, that queen drops in, it's not quite mate because your knight can block, but still, it makes sense. The king to b1 protects this. I mean, it protects all three of these squares. The only thing it does bad negatively, I think, because there's often a downside even to the best moves, and here I think one downside is that now the knight can't drop back if it needs to. So, and Larsen plays his best move, which is, I thought it was pretty clear what he intended when he played b5 was to go b4. So it makes sense to go ahead and play b4, challenging the knight. Now, again, as I said, the knight cannot drop back, so it has to go somewhere else. Or does it? Stockfish says, well, let's just forget about the knight, and we'll just chop off bishops. But Bobby Fischer says, we'll move the knight, that's fine. Puts the knight in the center. Where black has two pieces hitting that square, and we have two defenders, so I guess that's okay. And he should take it with the bishop. It's a mistake to take it with the knight. I don't know why. Maybe I do know why. If you take it with the knight, that exposes you to this, which you then have to take care of, or lose your rook, and then you have more defenders on that square. Okay, so it makes sense to take with the bishop first, which Larsen does. I don't know what Larsen's rating was at this point. I assume he was a grandmaster, or at least a titled player at this point. I do know there's at least one opening named after him. Is it B3? I think 1B3 is the Larsen opening, or Larsen attack. Are there any openings named after Bobby Fischer? I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there obviously could be, and I wouldn't know about it. All right, now I assume we take back with the bishop, or would you want to take back with the pawn here? Stockfish says pawn is slightly better. Mr. Fischer chose the bishop. Not sure why, other than it forces, I guess, the issue, because now you're attacking a rook. So it kind of says it. I don't know, though, because Larsen's got two defenders on this square. But oh, wow, and look here. According to Stockfish, best move by far is to take back with the knight. Because once we take the pawn, you would win a pawn here, and black would be up a pawn at that point. But Larsen chose the next best move, which is moving his rook out of danger, choosing to leave the bishop here. That was a mistake, according to Stockfish. Bobby Fischer's best move is to bring that bishop back, which he did. And now black doesn't have the opportunity to win that pawn anymore. Okay. Makes sense to me. Although, I mean, I don't know if that is a mistake. You don't have the bishop, the light squared bishop pointing down here anymore, but now you have a rook pointing through this open file. You still have the queen pointing through here, but this, it may not do any good here because that pawn is now blockaded. And you still have this bishop coming through at some point. Okay. I'm not sure what white's best move is. It says h6 is what Stockfish says. h6 or h5 are both great. No, sorry, it's black's turn. That doesn't make any sense. h6 or h5, that makes more sense. Okay. Or knight to d7. What does knight to d7 do? It unleashes this bishop or proposes a bishop trade, I suppose. What did Larsen played rook to c7? I think obviously preparing to double the rooks here. And I could not have guessed what white's best move was, but it says a3 is the top move. Well, it's changing its mind. a3 or h4. Okay. I had just said that one good reason to bring the bishop back here was to blockade this pawn, because that makes this queen not going anywhere. Sorry, not going anywhere through this diagonal, because that pawn's cut off. That pawn's blocking its own queen, and our bishop prevents that pawn from getting out of the way. But a3 invites that pawn to get out of the way. No, it doesn't. Oh, sorry. Okay, the queen's undefended. So that pawn will not take because of this. Okay. So a3 makes sense as the best move. But very close on its heels is a4, jumping past. And again, the pawn would not take en passant because of it's pinned. But Fischer did the third best move here, which, I mean, still pretty good, right? What is it doing? Is that what it's doing? No, that doesn't make sense, because the knight could just take it there and be protected by this pawn. But either way, I guess that opens the file, semi-open file for the rook. But yeah, if you move forward, the knight's just going to take it, and that knight from there will be defending the bishop for a bishop trade. But you have opened this file, and you've got other pieces ready to come to that file too. So that could be dangerous. Okay, that makes sense, I guess, in that respect. Larsen plays his best move, queen to b5, which is getting out of the pin. So now this pawn can take if it needs to. But that's about all that does, I think, is get the queen out of the pin. Or unpins the pawn. I know doesn't seem to be threatening anything else from here. Okay. And Fischer pushes the h-pawn. Now, again, why would you not take? Is it just because it opens the file? But it's going to open the file anyway if you don't take, right? I don't get that. Sorry, this is not the next move, but why would you not take? I just want to see what Stockfish says. That's a big, bad blunder. Okay, and that's because you would take this bishop, and they would not take back with the knight, which would be a mistake. They would take back with the king, and then you would play g4, forcing a knight move. No, the knight wouldn't even move, according to Stockfish. You would guard the knight with rook to c5. Oh my goodness. And just give up the knight. And then you wouldn't take back. You would check here. Basically forcing the king back. And Stockfish says to go down there. Okay, well, I don't know why that's really, really bad to take back with the knight, because all White's gained so far here is 1 pawn. You're a pawn up, right? No, you're 2 pawns down and a piece up. Okay. But somehow you're just really far ahead no matter what you do. Okay, going back to the line. After Fischer played this pawn move, Larsen played Stockfish's best move, which is doubling his rooks as he had clearly planned by moving that one to c7 and now the other one over to c8. That's what his plan was, and that's what he did, and that's Stockfish says that's what he should have done. Okay, so now does Fischer take this? Because that seems like the only reason you would want to move it here. Because if you push it forward, then it just stops. The bishop retreats one way or the other, and then your pawn is done. So I assume it doesn't make it only makes sense to take care of that. Are we defended here? We have 3 defenders on this pawn, so we're not really worried about these rooks. And Fischer does take the pawn. Okay. I assume you take back, but which way? I know you normally want to take back toward the center. Okay, and then Stockfish says any other move is really, really bad. Oh, you can't take back with this one. Aha, I just saw that. You cannot take back with the g-pawn. That's why he didn't want to trade this bishop earlier, even though he offered it for a trade. Fischer had offered the bishop to trade here, what, 8 moves back or so, 10 moves back. But when Larsen didn't take, he immediately retracted it. And now it's coming in handy. Okay. So you have to take with the h-pawn or not take at all. So I assume we take with the h-pawn? Yes. Only move that's not a blunder. Okay. Now what do we do? I don't know. I'm just guessing. What is it? Okay. Well, Stockfish is just very antagonistic here. It just says to put the rook there and see if the bishop wants to take it, and then we get in with our queen, and of course our other rook can come back up our queen at a moment's notice, very quickly. Fischer was not yet prepared to enter that way. Of course, I suppose they don't have to take it, right? Yeah, you kind of do have to take, because remember, this pawn is pinned. So if you had your rook here and they didn't take, you can take that pawn. Oh, wow. Okay. Fair enough. Or if they don't take, you don't have to take that pawn. You can just go ahead and bring your other rook. Wow. But he didn't play that. He played g4, which was, I think, one of the better moves. Okay. But what does g4 do? Are we attacking? Are we coming after the knight? Because if you do that, again, can't the knight just move out of the way this way? I mean, it's not like you don't see this coming. What does Larsen do? He plays, according to Stockfish, Larsen's best move was a5, and that's what he played. I guess that makes sense to... is it counterplay? Is that what this is called? We're doing a queenside attack here because we can't do anything, because he can't do anything about this situation. Maybe. I'm not sure I understand why a5 was the absolute best move. Maybe it's because he doesn't have anything else. I don't know. And g5 is what Fischer plays here, which I think, again, was obvious from playing g4. It's not doing anything else except preparing g5. Hitting the knight. So where does the knight go? Is it better to drop back? Probably not. Because, again, we have this rook on this, covering this whole file, and this one ready to come behind it. So does it drop back this way? What does it do? h5, it says, Stockfish says is the best move. And that's when he plays. And Fischer takes it. Okay. There's still not a huge advantage here. I'm just thinking back. Am I remembering incorrectly that maybe 10 or so moves ago that Fischer's advantage, according to Stockfish, was over 1, above +1? I mean, it never got huge. I know that. They're both staying within +1 to 0, so. Okay, you would take back with the pawn, would you not? No. Look at the Stockfish recommendation up there. That's your best move. For black. Just take the bishop now. But Larsen took the rook with the pawn, which is a blunder. But it's only a blunder if you play g6 next. Wow. Fischer would blunder if he took this bishop now, or if he brought his rook now. Or did anything else. Did he play it? That I don't understand, other than the fact we've already established that the f7 pawn is pinned from our bishop back here. That's the... putting pressure on the pinned piece. Is that how that goes? PP on the PP? Put pressure on the pinned piece. But can you go back one? Any other move is a blunder. Your second best move on the whole board is a4, and that's a blunder. Your third best move is twice as bad, to trade bishops now. In any other move, I would have thought you might wanted to bring a rook here. But no, all of those are horrible. Only g6 is good here. And that's what he played. Okay. Wow. I mean, I guess that's a pretty powerful piece here because, I mean, again, this pawn, the f7 pawn is pinned, and now that's guarding this spot, which you can pretty easily get to with these, I think. Well, I don't know. I see that this pawn is guarded by the queen right now. But it looks like there's about to be a lot of hard right transference here. A lot of pieces suddenly shifting to the king side. Larsen's best move, according to Stockfish now, is to take this bishop. Is that what he played? No, he played his second best move, which is to just prevent this whole exchange of bishops. And sorry, I got distracted by Stockfish saying queen to g5. Best move. Well, I did notice I had just said that queen was guarding the h-pawn, and it's not anymore. Larsen just chopped off that line of defense. He created a barrier here that the queen cannot get through and will not get through because this pawn's not going anywhere. And so it would be wrong for Fischer to take it, wouldn't it? What is he going to play? Second best move, check with the pawn. Okay. Again, I notice a discrepancy here that he's supposed to take with, Larsen's supposed to take with the rook, but he moves his king, which is not the best. It's a mistake. And maybe one reason is because that pawn is kind of getting cemented in from this bishop, and this pawn guards both of these squares. But I mean, I guess check is one way to not have to move this bishop. Again, Stockfish saying queen to g5, best move. Okay, Fischer plays the pretty close, still +7, is just to step this bishop back. And maybe aiming for this, because you've got your queen behind it. That's getting pretty dangerous. Okay. What does Larsen do? d5. Trying to crack open the center, create some counterplay, I guess. Oh, it separates the bishop from the pawn. Okay, I understand that. It blocks the defense of that. But can't you just take? Because your e-pawn is defending that? Right? Oh, wow. apparently cannot take with that. Why would you not take with that? Stockfish says no, that's not even in the top 3. This is the top move, but what's wrong with taking with the bishop? This is hypothetical now. Why is that so bad? That loses all of Fischer's advantage. So I assume he didn't do that. Haven't looked at the next move yet. That's because the battery now comes in. Why wouldn't you take? Because, well, no, the queen would have to check here. I was going to say all these squares are cut off by my bishops. But then you would just go back, wouldn't you? What's so bad about taking? That's a blunder. And then you would take, right? And then queen's going to... No, queen's going to check us down here. That's why, because they get another piece for it. Well, no, not necessarily, right? Just drop it. And then you get a pawn? No. Then you have a passed pawn over here. Okay. All of that would transpire if you played my move. Okay, well, good thing probably nobody played my move. Stockfish says have to take with the pawn, and that's what Fischer did. He was aware of all these other things, obviously, that I wasn't aware of. Okay, how does Larsen respond? Stockfish says a4. It's time to start smashing in through here if you want to save this in any way. He doesn't play that. He finally takes this pawn now that the bishop isn't protecting it anymore because the bishop's been blocked by his own pawn. But that wasn't great. d6 is the best move now. Okay. Well, it's white's only passed pawn, and it has a battery behind it. And moving it out of the way frees the bishop. Multi-purpose move. Okay. And it's one of only 2 moves that doesn't lose all of white's advantage. And that's what Fischer played. Okay. If I am playing with the black pieces, I have no idea what to do now. What does Stockfish? Stockfish is trying to make up its mind between rook to d7, a4, queen to c6. It says none of these are really good, but none of them are much worse than the other. Which one of those did Larsen choose? None of them. Okay, that one was worse than all the others. It adds a defender to this, but now can't you just move it forward again? No, it's one of the top 3 moves to move it forward. What did Fischer do? Because the top move, it says, is bishop to g5 now. That's what Fischer played. I get that it hits the rook, but the rook was going to move anyway, wasn't it? Where can it move? It can move here, I guess. But it can't move there because of our bishop. It just escaped our bishop. So what can he do with it? Stockfish says he has to play a4 now. Has to. What does he play? That wasn't one of the top 3, and in fact, that sets up a forced mating sequence. Okay. But going back one, Stockfish is saying just give up the rook. Look at that. a4 is the top move. Rook to f7 is the next. Well, it was second. Now it's third. But that loses to this, doesn't it? And queen to a4. Oh, no, queen to a4 disappeared. Rook to c4 is now the... What? Is Stockfish having a stroke? Or do I just don't understand chess at all? Okay, we moved our bishop here to challenge the rook. That's an obvious threat. And our other bishop guards some of the spaces that the rook can move to. But Stockfish says a4 is our best move. Rook to f7, giving up the rook, is black's second best move. And that's a forced mating sequence at that point. And rook to c4, which also gives up a rook, is the third best move. Wow. And Larsen didn't play any of those. He brought his queen back. This has to be the best move now, doesn't it? That's why you put the bishop there in the first place. Let's see. Okay, well that's what Fischer played. And the bishop taking back makes sense. Yeah, that's... Oh, but we're at mate in 7 now. Oh my goodness. I don't see it. Do you see it? I don't see a forced mate. I mean, I know we're getting close to some kind of trouble here, but... Oh, okay, we've got check right here on h6 with this bishop cutting that off. Let's just look at this real quick. The bishop cuts off those, and if we checked here, the queen cuts off these, and the pawn cuts that off. Pretty close. Okay. I don't use the green color often enough, do I? Okay. So we're getting close, but I made in 7. Okay, it says Fischer's best move is to check now. Which they would block with the queen. Wait, am I reading that line right? Queen to h6 check, queen to g7 blocking check, and then rook g1? Wouldn't that just give up the queen? I'm going to follow that line out. I don't know if that's what happened. He checks here. Oh, see, now Stockfish isn't saying G1, queen to G7 is the best, but it is saying okay, it's just as good as king to E8. What if he did that? Rook to G1 is definitely the best move here. I would never see that because it looks like you're giving up a queen. Why is it not giving up a queen? What happens if you take the queen? Oh. Oh, wow. Mate. Main 1. Okay, so you're not giving up the queen for sure. Because again, the bishop cuts off these, the pawn cuts that off, and if you moved your rook down here, that would have to be mate once the queen gets out of the way. Well, then rook to g1's a great move. Okay, backing up to this position, did he play queen to h6 check? No. He played the next best move, which was d7. Which cuts the queen off from defending over there. And what did Larsen do? It says rook to b8 is his best move, or a8. What? I mean, to get it out of danger, I guess. And king to g7 is his next best move. Oh, because to guard this square. That makes sense. What did he play? He moved rook to d8, which was not good at all. Fischer didn't see the fastest check. The fastest mate, I mean. This is the fastest mate. It's a forced mate in 3 or less. And the next best is queen to d6, which is mate in 7 or less. Interesting. So I don't feel so bad then. All those times that the computer said, oh, you had mate in 4, but it took me 12 moves. It doesn't, as long as I want, right? But he did not play the fastest mating sequence. He played queen to d6 check. Which, let's see, now the pawn guards this, the queen hits these, and our bishop is still there chopping this off. So that only leaves 1 square for the king to escape, or blocking with the bishop. But if you block with the bishop, then that's mate in 1. Maybe that's what he saw. Maybe that's what Fischer saw, that he would block with the bishop, and then he would have mate in 1 over here. But instead of blocking with the bishop, king to g7 leads to rook to g1, then king to h7, then queen takes bishop. And it's getting close to over at that point. But here, that's the end. Larsen resigned at this point, perhaps seeing that it was hopeless. Okay, Well, I feel like I learned a couple things. For one thing, I was encouraged by that last segment there where Fischer, backing up one move, had a mate in 3 if he moved his queen to h6, forced mate in 3, but instead he chose a slower path, maybe hoping it would be faster if the bishop blocked and then you have mate in 1. But regardless, he took care of business, smoked it out. Where was because we were even way back here, not there. How far back was it since the last time we were even? Where did it go wrong? I already forgot. Okay, it was about here. Okay, this is where it went wrong. And this happens to me in some of my games. I'm not comparing myself to Larsen or Fischer. Well, maybe to Larsen just a little bit here. But there will be a point in my game where I won't take back, or I do take back, and it turns out that later in the evaluation that was a huge blunder. And this turns out to right here, Larsen has to take back to maintain equality. He has to take the bishop, allow his knight to be taken, and then take the pawn with the queen. And if in the middle of that we have a bishop trade, that's okay. But that's what Stockfish said he had to do. But since he chose not to, instead he moved that rook over. Ever since then, he didn't have an advantage. Fischer had a strong advantage from here on out, and he played either the top or second best move almost every play. And remember, in 1957, there was no Stockfish or anything like it. So it's pretty impressive. But yeah, the advantage stayed at about +1 until... Where did it really shift? There. It really shifted right there. He should not have taken back. That was the next mistake. He should have taken the bishop first. A bishop trade here and then taken back to maintain, to keep Fischer's advantage under +1. Not that they measured advantage that way back then. I have no idea what they did. But yeah, that was the next mistake, is taking the rook first because of g6. And that's another impressive one right there. I don't think I ever would have spotted that as being the best move, but it's the only move that's not a blunder. That one blows my mind. Like, it seems like the kind of move that Stockfish would find, but the fact that a human found it, even one of the best chess players to ever play chess, even then, it's what was his reasoning? It had to have gone back to the thing that I said, PP on the PP, putting pressure on the pinned piece. But that can't be the only reason that that's such a great move. And trading bishops here is not even among the top 5. Or top 3, I mean. Okay. Well, thank you for watching. We'll try to do more of these in the future. I won't do too many of them because they take a while. But we'll see you next time.